Well, welcome to Conwy, spelled Conwy. Now, along with the castle in the distance, this garrison town was built in the 1280s to give Edward the First a toehold in Wales. As were no real cities in a 13th century Wales, this was an English town, planted with settlers for the king's political purposes. What's left today are the best medieval walls in Britain, surrounding a humble town crowned by a bleak and barren hulk of an estate that is awesome to this day and still is. Now, Conway's charming high street leads down to a fishy harbor that permitted Edward to restock his castle safely. And because the modern highway was tunneled under the town, Conway has a strolling ambience. I think it's the perfect size. It's big enough to have real vitality, but it's small enough to be cozy. It's one of the purely delightful towns of its size in Britain. And for me personally, when I went through Ancestry.com to check out where I was from and who I am, I discovered that I'm Welsh. I'm primarily Welsh. I'm not like 100% or even 80%, but it's the majority of what I am. And if they do a DNA dot where the majority of my DNA in the world comes from, it comes from here. And so in August, I made this a pilgrimage to come to this site to see this town. And I'm back, bringing Jackie along with me this time. So if you ever wanted to know who and what you are, you need to know where you're from. I was born in Winona. I was raised in the Twin Cities. I live in La Crosse, but this is where my people come from. Now, we are right now atop the most complete set of medieval walls in Britain. In 1283, workers started to build them in conjunction with the castle. And 4 years later, they sent a message to London declaring castle habitable, town defensible. Edward then sent them the English settlers. Now, the views on top are all the way down to the castle. You can see it down there in the opposite corner of the town. From up here, guards could spot ships approaching by sea. And if you turn this way, they could see the Conwy Mountains, which you can't see with that building in the way, but the Conwy Mountains are all the way back through there. The turrets, you see, were positioned about every 50 yards, connecting each rampart, and each one had a drawbridge that could be raised up to bottle any breach. Now, once we pass the second turret down here, I'm going to show you the inside wall is cracked. You can see here it is cracked. Now, why it's cracked is when they were tunneling underneath this turret for the underground train, the construction accidentally undermined the foundation, effectively taking the same tactic that invading armies would have taken. The huge crack makes plain why undermining was such a popular technique in medieval warfare. Well, this road here is called Dry Ditch or Town Ditch Road, named for the dry moat that was the first line of defense from the highest tower down to the riverbank. As was the case for most walled towns, there was a clear swath of dead ground outside the walls, so no one could sneak up. And once England centralized and consolidated its rule, there was no longer a use for all the walls and castles in Britain. Most fell into disrepair, ravaged by time and by scavengers who used them as quarries. During the Napoleonic Wars, English aristocrats were unable to make their grand tour of the continent, so they explored the far reaches of their own land. That's when ruined castles such as Conway's were discovered again and began to be appreciated for the romantic allure. Okay, here is the main gate into the city. There is one door in, there is one door out. And this road is now called Berry Street. Berry. But its original name was Burial, Burial Street, because this was originally a big mass pit where they buried all the mass burials for the 7th century plague. So, Berry, Berry, tasty, burial, not so much. Now, this beauty is called the Carmel Church. It's a Presbyterian church. It's a fine example of the stark architecture, statement architecture, they'd call it. No frills, it's stern. It's typical of churches built in the early 20th century. Even very small Welsh towns tend to have churches for several Christian denominations. The Welsh have a reputation for nonconformity, even contentiousness. As the saying goes, get 2 Welshmen together and you'll have an argument. Get 3 together and you'll have a fight. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Welsh Christians who didn't want to worship in the official English-style Anglican Church joined nonconformist congregations such as Methodists and Congregationalists and Quakers or Presbyterians. You can say nonconformist is to Anglican as Protestant is to Catholic. Religious affiliations is closely tied to politics in Wales, where the Anglican Church, aka the Church of England, goes by the more politically appealing the Church in Wales. Still, many Welsh say the Anglican Church is the Conservative Party at prayer, and the nonconformist churches are the Labour Party at prayer. Let's go on, Sally. I'm going to skip the next 2 spots because they're not exciting. An art academy and the first original house in Conwy. So that's where we're having dinner. And this is High Street. We drove up this. So shops up and down every side. We're going to walk downhill. Okay. Josh and I had a drink here too. Nice little place to have a drink. We're going to stop in front of this red door on the left, and that'll be as far down as we go. Then we'll walk to the castle. We just walked through the harbor gate, which is one of the three original gates in the town walls that leads us down here to the waterfront. The harbor dates from the 13th century, when it served as Edward's castle and town. The harborfront street is called King's Quay. Now, Conwy, it was once a very busy slate port. Slate barged downstream from up here to the left, was loaded onto big three-masted ships and transported to the continent. Back when much of Europe was roofed with Welsh slate, Conwy was a boom town. Now all the mud is new. The modern bridge caused this part of the river to silt up, and the actions of the European Union have had a mixed effect on the waterfront. EU money helped pay for the recently built promenade, but hygiene laws have forced Conwy's fishermen out. Now that the fish must be transported in refrigerated vehicles, the fishermen had to set up a shop a few miles away, since refrigerator trucks can't get through these stone gates. Now, Conwy's harbor is now a laid-back area that locals treat like a town square. On summer evenings, the action is on the quay. The scene is mellow, it's multi-generational, and it's perfectly Welsh. It's a small town, and everyone here enjoys the local cuisine. They enjoy chips, they enjoy ice cream and beer, and savoring the great British pastime, which is torturing little crabs on the beach. You know, it's a little easy to miss the smallest town in Great Britain. It's red, it's 72 inches wide, it's 122 inches high, and it's worth a pound to pop in and listen to the short audio guide tour. It doesn't have a bathroom, but it does have a bedpan. Here's the harbor gate that we came through, and here's the Liverpool Arms. Josh, you may remember we had a drink here. Well, it's a pub. It was built by a captain who ran the ferry service to Liverpool in the 19th century. Today it remains a salty and characteristic hangout, one of the few thriving pubs in town. In 1900, Conwy had about 40 of them. Back when interest in your food, back when the harbor was busy with quarrymen shipping their slate, musclemen catching their catch, and small farmers with their goods. Conwy's pubs were all thriving. Today, times are tougher on the pubs, and this one, of course, depends on tourism. Here we have a mussel processing plant. Mussels, historically a huge crop for Conwy. This is where they're processed in the months that be with an R. If there's a fresh catch, you'll find a little shop here, but there isn't any fresh catch today, so there's no little shop here for today.